Well, thanks for tuning in to another one of my YouTube videos. I decided that since I was bored during this deer season that interrupts my predator coyote hunting, that I would do a little video on something that I thought of and designed, a little feather decoy. I'm sure you've heard of them before, where you just put a little feather out on a string, on a stick somehow, or hang it from a limb, and to get a predator's attention. And you know, in my experience, which I've been hunting coyotes for about 8 years now, on purpose I call it, instead of just taking pot shots at them, and I've noticed that some of the decoys, if you use some decoys, it acts almost like a repellent instead of an attractant. I've noticed that on using a coyote decoy, using a 3D body decoy. I've used them and killed a couple coyotes using them, but if I wouldn't have been looking at the direction that the coyotes were coming, I wouldn't have seen them when they come on the scene, saw it, stopped, and then turned tail and started walking and running off. And so I've stopped using them. What's really working for me, it's kind of a side note from this feather decoy that I've made. I come up with a way to make a feather decoy that was portable and won't get all goofed up and the feather screwed up, and it's hard to haul around, and it works, and the feather doesn't wrap around itself. I'm going to show you that design in a second, but a couple of these other ones I want to show you here real quick. This Miss Hoptober that Montana Decoys makes. This ain't any kind of a plug for them or anything. Just want to show you what we've done with it. And what we've done is made the thing three-dimensional. If you'll notice, instead of it being flat, it won't fold up anymore. But it really works a lot better now that it's three-dimensional. Instead of it, when the when the coyote comes around it and gets to where it's oriented this way, and then they can't see it anymore, they can see it all the way around. And also I added a little bit of movement to it by just taking a clothespin and a feather and hooking that to it, like something white, maybe just a little bit of a strip of whatever, whatever you got available. But white works really well, they can see it. But just putting that on a clothespin and hooking that to its ear when I set the thing up, and then when it sits there and the wind starts to play with it, you can move it around any way you want. It looks like their ears are moving. It gives that movement where it's supposed to be, and it really works. I mean, this is a pretty effective decoy by itself, but when you give it a little bit of realism like that, it's even more effective. But these static decoys seem to be also another thing. These static decoys seem to work better for me than the motion decoys. I've got just about every decoy out there. The Mojo, the Fox Pros, moving decoy, and they tend to do more to frighten the predators than they do to draw them in. That's been mine and another gentleman, a couple other people that coyote hunt pretty seriously. It's been their experience. I don't know if it's because there's more predator hunters out there, or what the deal is, and they're used to seeing them. I just don't know, but I just about half the time, or more than half the time, I don't even use a decoy at all. I'll just put the decoy, or I'll put the call where the coyote can't see it, and then they have to run around and search around to find the source of that noise, which gives you a chance to see them before they see you. So I'll just put mine under a log, or I'll just bury it with some. If it's out in a barren field, I'll just try to put stuff on top of it so they can't see it. Because I've had them run right up to my call within about maybe 10 or 15 feet in a barren cow-eaten field where there's just nothing, and the grass is a quarter of an inch high, and they come up to within, like I said, a good 10, 20 feet of it, and they'll see it, or farther, and they see it, and they'll bolt and run. So it's important to hide that decoy from, or your call, from my experience. Okay, now I got another one. Now this one, I'm sure a lot of you know, this is the Fonzie one, and we've made it three-dimensional. Just stuff the thing. Put a couple of feet on it. Like that. But and this has worked. I mean, I've called it bobcats straight to it, coyotes. And it's really an effective decoy. Now what has given it even more realism than the regular static tail is putting another feather on the end of it. And what I did was I just lopped off the tail here on the end. You can kind of see that. And on the end of a dowel rod that's about this long, I just hung another feather. And that thing sitting out there, just the slightest little breeze, it'll move. And I mean, that is really effective. You've got the prey sitting out there, a small little fawn that the coyotes love to eat, and the bobcats, and then you give it a little bit of realism, and that's just enough maybe to get them to come in. And I mean, this is really working for me. These just the rabbit and the deer by itself, but when I put these feathers on there, it's really working. So, and then when you stow it, you just kind of push this thing up in there like that, and then I put me a little string on mine so I can put it over my shoulder like this and carry it. It makes it a little bit more convenient. But that's just a couple of ideas that seem to be working. And just like a lot of these magazines are saying now, one of the crucial things to do is to stay on stand a lot longer than usual, than the standard 15 minutes to 20 or 25 minutes. I've called them in 35, 40 minutes, and I'll now stay on, if it's a good looking stand, at least an hour, if not more. Now I want to show you my feather decoy. I just call it a feather decoy. Now when it's all put together and stowed, it looks like this. And I guess that thing is about, it's 29 inches long. And what I do is I put it in my pack and just lash it to it, and I mean it's not in the way. Now what I did was I just used an old arrow that I found. It just comes right out of this little piece of 1/2 inch CPVC piping that I had laying around, and the feather just goes right in there. If you can see that or not, the feather goes right in there, so it won't get it all screwed up, and this comes right back out, and it's in good shape. It's not all tore up. Now what I got here, first I'll show you the little container. This thing here, get the camera good. I've got a little deal here I'll show you in a minute. But on the bottom of it, I glued an end cap, just 1/2 inch CPVC. It's just a little bit smaller around than PVC. And this thing just happens to be 19.5 inches long, if anybody wants to know. 19.5 inches long. And what I did was I took an arrow. Some people will want to know this. The arrow with the tip on is 29 inches long, but you can, to whatever you want to make it to. Just a regular old arrow I found at one of the 3D shoots one time. And the first thing I did was I tied this feather straight to the end of the arrow nock there. I just drilled a little hole through the arrow nock and just put my fishing line through that. But what was happening, since it's close to this, it'll wrap around this the arrow shaft, or spin around. And another thing, it'll spin around on itself and get all hung up. So I got thinking about that. I said, well, it needs something to keep it away from the arrow shaft, and it seems to flutter around a little bit better too. So what I did, let me get a little bit of light here. Yeah, that probably helped. There you go. So what I did was I just took a little piece of wire and I put inside that little hole that I drilled through the knock and just wrapped it around, and you put some tape over it so it won't catch up on everything. And then this wire goes back, and you don't bend it real sharp right there, because over time it'll break it a lot faster. So eventually this thing will probably break, but maybe not, because I mean I keep a good little curve on it. And then what happens, so this thing can't get to that, and it can't spin around this and get hung up on it. And there's one last little thing. As this thing spins around in the air, around and around and around, it's going to wind up this little cord. Now you can use fishing line. I used what do you call that, gorilla line, that braided line, just because it's tough, really tough stuff. I don't know if you can see that in that video or not. But what I did to keep that from spinning up, and it don't take very long at all. In a minute, this thing spun up and it's stuck to there, and it's not moving very good. So what I did was I took a little swivel off of out of my fishing stuff, and that had a little clip on the end of it, and cut the clip off and left a little swivel. I think you can see that. I get it in the camera correctly here. Here we go. It's just a little swivel. And I took one end of it and connected it to the wire, just stripped the wire back, insulation back a little bit, and run it back through the little hole on the other side of the swivel. And then I soldered it on so it won't move. And now when this thing turns, you can see that thing turns. And I mean, it works. So now the feather doesn't get wrapped around this, and the line itself doesn't get wrapped around itself, get all knotted up. And it works. It'll sit out there for as long as you want to set it out there. And this thing really works. Now the thing I really like about this, and it's kind of cool, is this little, my little tube I showed you about. Now to stow this so I don't get all messed up and hung on something and pull the feather off and you get out there and you can't use it. So what I do, right in the end of that tube right there, I just insert this. I'll show you what that little thing dangling there is for in a second. I just insert this in here, line up the feather, and push it the rest of the way in. And the little feather stays pretty much out of harm. Now you want to unstow it when you're not using it, I would think. That's not really necessary, but over time, if you left it during the off season or something like that in here, it'd probably be pretty squashed down pretty good, so just leave it out during the off season. But that's just a side note there. So there it is on the end. It's all nice and ready to pull right back out and ready to rock. So we just put that bad boy back in there. Line that back up. I'm going to put the curved part of the feather so it'll be a little more curved when it goes in. Just kind of put it there nice and neat. And now, if you put that thing in there, what I did is you need a pointy end, so I just left the field tip on it. Well, if you put that in your pack, or you're putting it down or something, I mean that's an eye hazard right there. Your eye could get punked with that thing and leave a chance to happen way out in the middle of nowhere and it'll happen. So what I did was I took just a little one of these little end cap things off of something that I got, this little rubber thing, and a little piece of stretchy rope, and I just kind of wind it around there and just pop it on the end. Now if you hit that with your eye, that's not going to hurt. And that's just a little bit better, because if you give it a chance to poke you in the eye out in the middle of nowhere, it's going to happen. I mean, that's Murphy. He's out there in the woods waiting for you to make a mistake and just ruin your day. I remember running across a guy that run a twig through his eye out deer hunting one time. Oh gosh, it was horrible. So that's it. It's my little feather decoy, and I think it's going to work really well. I haven't had a chance to use it. Like I said, I've been waiting for this deer season to get over, and so I can get back out there and predator hunt. I appreciate you watching. Can't think of anything else about this. Let me know what you think about this. Subscribe if you like my little channel, and I wish you really good luck out there, and hit the like button too if you like it. And really, like I said again, I really appreciate you tuning in, and if there's something else that you want me to do a little video on, let me know. And if anything else I come up with, I'll put it on YouTube too. Really appreciate you watching, and good luck out there. Thanks.